back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with Stephanie Burke and science advisor Matt Moniz. We've got the big man, John Brightman, in tonight, helping us run Spooky TV on SpookySouthCoast.com and on YouTube and on the Spooky South Coast app and on wherever else you can get streaming live video. You will find our faces. We're sorry for that. Well, we don't apologize for Stephanie's. Hers is fine. But for the rest of us... Thanks. Well, I mean, what else? What do you want me to say?
Well, it's better than the previous statement.
And she's like expecting me to shower her with compliments. Stephanie, you're so
haven't
beautiful.
In like 10 years, so I'm not expecting it anytime soon.
It's not who I am.
I know. I love you just the way you are, Tim.
Good, because I'm not changing.
I know.
Including this shirt. I've been wearing it for 2 weeks straight. That's not true at all.
No, it's not. There's live videos to prove it.
That's not, I actually was concerned the other day because I wore a shirt twice in the same week. And I'm like, when I go Facebook Live with my news videos, somebody's going to point that fact out.
Did they?
No. Thankfully.
Well, you just gave yourself away.
It just goes to show that people just don't pay attention to me enough.
Right.
So I'm not that concerned about it. Not that upset. Well, we are talking about the paranormal. We're talking about ghosts tonight with our guest Tara Teresa Hill, and she runs a website known as the Ghost Post. So you can check that out for yourself, theghostpost.co. So you don't even have to type in the whole .com. You can just stop at the C and the O. You don't need the M. She's saving a little bit of time there. And that's time that you can use spent checking out her posts and checking out her stories. You can also follow her on Facebook at facebook.com/Tara Teresa Hill. And also you can follow her on Twitter as well at Tara Teresa Hill. And of course, we have that posted up on all of our information as well. And I want to ask you, Tara, too, Matt, our producer who's usually here and he's off tonight, who was working on booking you, he mentioned that you have a Facebook group as well.
Yes, I have a Facebook group. It's called the Paranormal Hotspot, the market for all things paranormal. And what it is it's basically a group I started. I actually linked it to my author page. And what it is basically, I feel like it's hard to advertise, like to let people know what you're doing, whether it's your blog or what have you, just to build your author platform. I said, I don't really see a lot of places to do that on Facebook. I mean, other than to share it in, like, paranormal groups. So I said, you know what, why don't I let other paranormal groups and paranormal investigators and anybody with a paranormal-related business, I said, why don't I let them join the group and they could just promote there? And then, of course, other people naturally who are just interested and aren't in the business, end of it, also join. And I said, that way we can all help find each other.
I mean, it is great that we have, with the internet and with social media, we are kind of all able to connect, and we're all able to, kind of just be, they use the word community, and we can debate whether or not it is, because some people aren't accepting of others and all that kind of stuff too. But there's a network. There's a great network of people that are able to be reached. That, when the old guy across from me here in the station, Matt Moniz, your beard's grayer than mine, so I'm going to call you the old guy. When he first started doing this, 30 years ago, it was a lot harder to be able to share thoughts and ideas with people.
Yeah, we didn't have the internet.
I can only imagine.
You didn't have, not only did you not have the internet, but like you didn't really have any way of knowing when people were doing, unless somebody like printed out a business card and put their name on it and said paranormal researcher, you wouldn't know until you knew somebody.
Yeah.
It wasn't like people were out advertising this like they are now.
No.
Well, I mean, I suppose so with, having something like, the Paranormal Hotspot where people can kind of get together and share those ideas, it also helps foster different ideas and things that people wouldn't have thought of and different approaches. We know that when we hold our ghost hunting events or whatever we do, one of the things that I'm fascinated with is seeing other people's methodologies and seeing their own thoughts and opinions and viewpoints on what they think ghosts are. And that's helped me widen my spectrum over the years. And I'm sure you guys get into some pretty heavy discussions like that in your group.
It depends. I mean, mostly what I do is I'll post things of interest, like articles I find or pictures of, pictures that have ghost stories attached to them. And I let people share. I have, people who are writing about their real experiences and publishing it in books and everything, put their stuff up there. It's still a very young group. I'm just trying to grow it to, I'm just trying to help it, grow and blossom into whatever it's going to be. But hopefully it helps bring people together.
I think I'm just taking a look at it now, and I think my favorite rule is rule number 4. No porn rule. But I do like the fact that you say that paranormal erotic art is fine, which is, it's there's a lot of it, and some of it is very tastefully done. But you also mentioned that it's not a dating site because it's a professional networking site. I would argue that in the paranormal world, some of us will just take a hookup any way we can get it. So we spend so much of our weekends running around in the dark, yelling at things that may or may not be there. That any chance that we can get to find like-minded people that are interested in that, we're not looking any gift horses in the mouth when it comes to how we meet people.
Well, I'm just trying to discourage like the creepy stalker kind of people. Like, hey, I see you're in the group. You want to go out on a date? Oh,
you're discouraging the creepy stalkers? All right. Well, I just sent a request to join. You can just ignore that then.
Oh no, not like that.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yes, but one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because obviously with your work and the way that you're fictionalizing ghosts and the way that you're utilizing them as characters, there's probably a lot of definition to who they are and how they got into that position that is part of their story and part of what you're sharing. But when it comes to real life ghost stories, have you made a determination in your mind about what you think ghosts are and how they come to be?
Sure. Yeah, I actually have. In my mind, I kind of actually wrote about this in one of my stories, that I'm working on. And basically, in my mind, you have spirits and ghosts, and I feel like even though we use them interchangeably, I mean, I'm not going to call them spirit stories because some people won't know what I'm talking about, so I would still call it a ghost story. But in my mind, like, a ghost is someone, they're all souls, human souls usually. And a ghost is someone who died, in, it could be a traumatic way, it could be a non-traumatic death, but the point is that they haven't crossed over into the light. Whereas I feel like a spirit is a soul who, after they pass on, they go into the light, or to the afterlife or the spirit world or whatever you want to call it, and then they can just kind of go back and forth. So, for example, someone dies and, they go off into the light, and then even though they've been in the afterlife and been in the spirit world, they could still come back to Earth to come visit or to do other things, what have you.
Well, my co-host here, Stephanie, is a psychic medium, and she encounters ghosts in kind of a different way that we do. And I know that, we've had, Stephanie, you and I have had discussions about what the nature is of these ghosts. But you say a lot of times spirits can kind of come in and out. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not.
Well, it depends. Are they crossed over or are they earthbound? And that's a huge difference. The readings that I do for most people with their past loved ones, I'm communicating with spirits that have already crossed over. So therefore they can come back and forth and visit whenever they do, they so please. Earthbound spirits are those that have chosen to stay here for whatever reason, and they have a various list of reasons. Every single spirit is different. So they choose to stay, therefore finding out their story, which is most of the time what we do, all ghost hunting or searching for different spirits, and finding out why they're still here and what their story might be and what they're still attached to. So that's completely different. And as far as traveling goes, or back and forth, or doing whatever they want to, some of them are stuck right where we find them. Others travel back and forth. We'll say in a neighborhood setting, so to speak, 3 doors down from where they originally haunt. Not the best word, but the easiest to describe the situation. So it truly depends on the situation and the spirit.
And Tara, when you're crafting these characters, I assume that you want them to have some level of, free will and some abilities to kind of be their own independent individual beings. But have you ever, and I'm sure you've heard of these stories as well as you're collecting the real life, true life stories, but have you ever heard stories where, spirits aren't they don't have that ability, where they are trapped, where they are maybe tied to a location or to a person or to an object, or there's something that's limiting them from being able to either move on or be able to just at least leave the location that they're currently in.
Oh yes, definitely. And I really love those stories too, you know, more the traditional kind of haunting story, even if it's done in a non-traditional way, but I like the idea of that because you can explore the psychology of the character and really find out what makes them tick and why are they stuck and what are they working through in order to get unstuck. So yeah, definitely I have done that before, and I do really enjoy reading and writing stories about that.
Because I mean, I've looked into a lot of like haunted objects, for example, where there are some sort of an attachment to a specific item, and that item might get shared with a family member, or somebody may buy it from a antique shop or what have you, and these spirits are attached to them, and it's because there's a strong bond between the spirit and the object. It's not anything that's like, it's not a curse. It's not something where there's a scientific explanation as to why it might be trapped to it. It's just nothing more than a strong emotional bond. And I think that that's a lot of what ghosts are just strong emotional bonds between an energy and an object, or an energy and a place, or an energy and the living.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. That's a good definition.
I mean, you ask me a week from now, my definition might change, but it all depends on what these stories are that I've heard. What's the first story that you ever heard, or the first experience that you ever had that made you say, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe there is something to these ghosts. Maybe ghosts are real"?
Okay, the first story that I remember hearing when I was a kid was, I guess what really would probably have sparked my interest as far as fiction was, I believe it's the Headless Horseman story. Really fascinated me for some reason, even though it also scared me, especially watching, the Disney version as a kid. But, so that would be for the fiction one. For my, I've had a bunch of different experiences, but I'd say, trying to think what was my first one that I would say, oh my goodness, that was definitely something strange. Well, when I was a kid, actually, we were living in this apartment building in Yonkers. Mm-hmm. And it was a big building. We had lived on the 5th floor with seemingly nothing happening. And then we moved on to the 2nd floor. And right away, the house felt really weird. And I didn't feel comfortable there. And, I was about, maybe 7, 8 years old. And weird things started happening. For example, my parents, we would hear each other, like, calling our names. So I would be in my room, and I would hear Mom and Dad calling me, and then they would swear they didn't. Or they would hear me calling them, and then I would say I didn't. So we had, like, this weird echo chamber going on. That was one of them. But I also would sometimes, like, I'd be playing in my room and suddenly feel like someone was watching me. I would get this really eerie sensation that someone's behind my back somewhere watching me. And I just kind of wrote it off, but not really, because I would kind of get freaked out. I would usually get up and run, and my parents would just say, "You're imagining it." So one day, my best friend came over at the time, my childhood best friend, and I said, I think my house is haunted, and my mom had a Ouija board in the house. And so I said, "You want to try to contact the ghost?" She said, "Yeah, that sounds cool." So we sat down. It's like a rainy day, and we're doing this. And my mom showed us how to use it. And after a few minutes of moving around, the little planchette, or I believe that's what it's called, it started to, move on its own. Like, we felt like it was moving on its own. And I said, "Are you the ghost that haunts this house? And, this building?" And she said yes. And I said, okay. And then I started asking, me and my friends started asking questions. And my mom is, cleaning and stuff in the background or doing whatever and thinking, oh, how cute, they're playing with the board. And I said, well, have you been in my room? She says, yes, I've been in all the rooms. The ghost identified herself as a female from a certain era. And I forget which era it was. I think it was like the 1900s maybe, around then. And what ended up happening was I said, well, how did you die? And she said, I hung myself.
Ooh.
And when I said that out loud, my mom immediately took over the board and, you know, kind of disrupted the connection and told the spirit to, you know, be at peace and everything. And she got really disturbed at that point. Months later, it's a big snowstorm, and my dad and her are helping shovel some people out. And we met a woman who was a local historian who happened to know about the history of our building in that area. And she had said that she actually told us about the houses that used to be there, kind of like for the Rockefeller type families. And she said that at least there was one where there was like some sort of big suicide. And I mean, obviously she didn't have a name or anything, but it was so weird to what I had said about the experience that it really, you know, made my mom think, oh my goodness, are we living in a haunted, you know, apartment kind of feeling. That was a really weird experience for me.
And that probably, you know, being who you are, kind of piqued your curiosity more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it piqued my curiosity, but it also made me think, well, wait a minute. So, yeah, it started to make me wonder about where do people go after they die? And that's when I started thinking also, you know, and I had other experiences that made me wonder this too. I mean, I would always ask my mother about her mother, who had passed away years before I was born. And I always wanted to know about her. And, you know, I just always had an interest in the past. And my mom would say, you know, you're young. Why are you always thinking about death? That's kind of how she would ask me.
Well, was there, as you know, this is happening, you know, you're fortunate enough to have a parent who is accepting of these experiences and accepting of the fact that this was actually happening. Did you grow up in a household that actually would foster discussion about ghosts and about the belief in ghosts?
Oh, definitely. I mean, my mom is actually a pagan and Wiccan, and she believes in ancestral spirits. I mean, she's the one who she really taught me about all this. I remember one of my earliest memories was a Halloween night when we're sitting in our living room, and there's a jack-o'-lantern, and she's telling me about how the spirits come through when the veil is thin, you know, and our ancestors are with us. And she always was very accepting and also, you know, educated me on this stuff. She didn't want me to be afraid. She always said death is just transition. It's not something, I mean, yes, we fear it. We fear the moment of it. But death is really just another change that we go through, that the soul lives on forever. And then she also taught me about, you know, I believe in reincarnation personally. So she taught me that, you know, we come back in different forms.
And I think, too, that when you have that type of an environment growing up, it makes it, in some ways, it makes it not only more acceptable, but more kind of, I think it gives you more of a tolerance to be able to hear other people's stories. You know, like with me growing up, I grew up in a household where it was kind of talked about a little bit. Nobody, if I said, you know, I'm afraid of the ghost that's in my room, I'd be told there was no such thing. But then at the same time, you know, I might hear my mother and my grandmother at the kitchen table talking about a ghost story from their own house or what have you. So it wasn't something where it was completely discouraged, but it wasn't the same situation as you had. But I also found that by having that background, it makes it so that I'm more understanding and compassionate to people who want to share their stories, as opposed to just being, obviously when you're collecting stories, you want to be somewhat objective and be that reporter. But at the same time, you have to understand that this is a huge emotional thing for people to have to experience.
Oh, yes, definitely. I understand that. And a lot of times people, you know, I always offer them, you know, if you don't want your name used, give me a fake name or I'll make up a fake name for you. You know, and I never give their last name unless, you know, they tell me to because they want promotion for something that they're doing. Then I'll use their last name if they give me permission. But yeah, definitely always, you know, like you said, being compassionate and understanding that they're trusting you with this information and these stories. And a lot of times what they say to me is, I'm just so glad you believe me. You know, I feel like sometimes like this was crazy, and it's just so nice to have someone, you know, not only want to share my story, but, you know, treat me nice and not, make fun of me for what I'm going to say or what I've said or anything. And I'm like, oh, no, I mean, thank you for sharing it with me. That's what I always tell them. And that's why I always thank them personally. If it's not my story, that's why I always put thanks to so-and-so for this story from this region, what have you, for sharing with me and for sharing this story.
One of the things that I think is the most fascinating when people share their own stories with me is when they are willing to put their entire put their entire belief set on the line when they have an experience like this. When they say, I'm not a person that ever would have believed in this, but I can't deny this experience. Or, growing up under this religion, I was taught that this stuff doesn't happen, but I can't reconcile with what I've experienced with what I've been told growing up. Like when people are willing to allow this type of an experience to change their worldview, to me, that is, that's a real special moment to get to share with somebody when they're willing to say everything that I thought that I knew was wrong.
Yeah, that is a really amazing experience. And it does happen, it does happen, I think, frequently to people where it's just suddenly this boom moment, where their whole worldview shifts. So
is there, for you, I mean, it seems like you've always been kind of accepting of this, and there was never kind of an aha moment where you had to completely rethink everything. But has there ever been an experience that you have had, or just something that has happened to you in researching these stories where you've said, okay, maybe this is a little bit more than I bargained for?
Yeah, there definitely has been. Actually, there was this experience I had where, I almost feel like it's like a pulling back of a curtain. And on the one hand, it's amazing and you want to know more. And on the other hand, I'm like, pull that back. Let's pull it closed. I don't really want to know about this. It kind of creeps me out. So I have had that experience actually about a little over a year ago. Now, I live in a pretty calm house, and I'm grateful for that. But sometimes, when people kind of get a premonition, but they don't know that it's a premonition until it happens, kind of thing, until after it happens.
Right. It's got to it's got to come to fruition for it to have made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was standing. We have this big window, and I was on the phone with my mother, and my husband was on the couch, and I was talking to her, and then suddenly I saw this really. It's like not. It wasn't dark outside. It was like dusk, so I could totally see. I had clear vision. All of a sudden, I see this really tall, very, very tall person. Well, figure, really, in a dark cloak. That's what it looked like. And I said, what is that? And as I turned to look, all I see is this dark figure in a dark cloak. I could not see a face. And they turned, and no joke, they disappeared.
Oh.
And I got so freaked out seeing this because it's daylight. They're not there anymore. It was literally maybe 15 seconds or something like that. And I just said to myself, but that doesn't feel right. Something really doesn't feel right. So that night, kind of went to bed earlier than usual. I'm more of a night owl. It's not unusual for me to be up till like 1 in the morning or later. And
you got to be kind of when you do this stuff.
Huh?
So you kind of got to be when you do this stuff. It's not an early to bed kind of pursuit.
Yeah, and also being a writer, you just tend to stay up late, I think, sometimes.
That's true, too.
At least I do.
That's when the best ideas come.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes when you're trying to go to bed, it's like, story idea. I'm like, really? I'm washing up for bed here. But anyway, so I closed down the blinds. I go to bed, and I just had this really weird feeling. Now, we had a pet bird named Sky, and he was kind of getting on in years, and he'd been a little sickly. And that night, he told me off when I came into the bedroom because we used to have to keep him separate from the cat. And so he kind of told me off when I came into the bedroom. I said, oh, go to sleep. And I went, because I said, it's just me, go to sleep. And I got in bed. And the next morning I wake up and I pull off his cover to say good morning. And he is lying dead on the cage ground. And I just got really freaked out because when I thought about what I saw and I thought about what happened, I said that, I think, was like seeing a Grim Reaper outside my house.
Well, yeah, that would be something that would kind of make me have pause. One of the weirdest things that ever happened to me was when I first started doing this show. Well, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to celebrate our 12th anniversary next week. So it's probably 12 years ago. It wasn't that long that we've been doing the show. And my co-host, Matt Moniz, who, as I mentioned before, had been doing this for a long time, warned me that when you start doing this and talking about this stuff is going to come out and start looking for you. So I kind of always, I took that in stride, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Ghosts don't care about me.
How did that turn out for you?
Well, it just so happened that one Saturday night I came home from doing the show, and as I closed the door of my car and got ready to run into my house, because that's what I do. I used to be afraid of the dark before I was a paranormal investigator, believe it or not. Now I just don't care.
But then again, your neighborhood, there may be other reasons to run into.
Right. There's wild animals and all kinds of stuff. But so, I close the door, and as I start getting ready to head into the house, I see a shadow figure walking down the street. And I think to myself, nobody should really be out this late. But I had one of those moments of, do I run toward it or do I run away from it? And I started walking down the street to see if I could figure out who was down there. And whatever was there disappeared. And there's nowhere that anybody could have gone that I wouldn't have seen where they would have gone, or heard them rustling through the trees or whatever. And it was just whatever figure was there, whatever humanoid figure was there disappeared. And that's when I said, okay, I guess I'm going to keep running to the front door when I get home at night now.
It was a pucklogy.
It might have been. But you're right. Like, when you start looking into this stuff, more of it does come back and look at you. And I'm sure. Sorry, go ahead. Man.
I was going to say, I'll give you the quote that was given to me years ago. For every step you take towards the unknown, it takes two towards you.
I thought it used to be 3.
Ooh,
That's
cool.
It depends. It
Two,
depends on how
three,
depends
whichever
on
way
how
it
big of a
works.
stride you have.
I just feel like I've always heard you say 3.
It'd probably be 3 steps for me, 1 step for John. It all depends on how much ground you cover when you walk. So again, we're talking with our guest Tara Teresa Hill, and you can check out her site, The Ghost Post. When you are collecting these stories from people and these real life stories, how do you do so? Is it things that people are sending you in written form? Are you interviewing them? Are you talking with them on the phone? Or is it a combination of all those different ways?
Well, some people have written me, especially, I've had a couple of people who are outside the country, and so it's easier for them to, write me something, and then I'll either edit it or depending on their writing capability, then I might reshape it. Sometimes they, send me just a bunch of information, and I form a story, a readable, entertaining story around it. Other times, most of the time I do interviews over the phone with them. I call them, and I basically, what I do is I put them on speaker. No one's, I'm home, and I just take down notes as they're talking. And then sometimes I have to slow them down a bit so I have time to write down everything. And then what I do is when I'm finished, I tell them once I have a draft ready for you, I'll email it to you, or sometimes I message it to them over Facebook if it's easier. Whatever they want, and then they give me feedback, tell me if I need to change something, if I made a mistake with someone's name, or I decided I want my name taken out. Mm-hmm. So I make sure that they like the final draft before I publish it.
Yeah, there's a lot of trepidation that I notice happens with people where, they're willing to share their story because they just want to share it with somebody, and then they start to have reservations because they're like, oh, what if my pastor sees it? What if my boss sees it? People tend to kind of shy away from it afterwards, but there is a lot of value in just getting these stories off your chest. For anybody that's thinking about, sharing a story with Tara, there's a lot of value in just getting it out there and being able to share it with somebody else. And I'm sure they all start their stories the same way, Tara, where they look at you and say, or address you as saying, you're going to think I'm crazy, but, and then they go into their story.
Yeah, a lot of times people start with that, or some people are very excited. They say, I've had so many, and I never knew, some people have grown up in a haunted house and just never got the chance to talk about it. I mean, because not everybody's a writer, so not everybody's going to, put this stuff on the internet or what have you. So they're like, oh, it's so great to talk to someone who can actually make sense of this and, make it, I tell you the story and you put it up in an entertaining way. That's great. A lot of people are excited to share. And like you said, some people aren't. So, it depends. But either way, I'm just always grateful that they're willing to share with me because, part of the reason why I started the blog was because, I love writing and I want to write about ghosts and that's what I want to be known for. And even though I love fiction, everybody kept saying a writer needs a blog. I said, well, I'm not going to write fiction and put it on a blog because,
right.
I like to take more time with it than that. So I said, well, I'll start a blog on ghosts. And I thought ghost stories, if I could do it as ghost stories as like a report would be fun, rather instead of talking about the technical stuff, which I don't know as well. I know of it, but I wouldn't call myself like a specialist in that end of like the technical aspects of it.
Well, that brings up a question that I have for you, and that's, have you thought about making that transition into actually being somebody that goes out and instead of just collecting reports, goes out there and investigates claims and gets more of a first-hand back and forth with the ghosts themselves as opposed to just collecting the stories of the living?
I've thought about it, and, I'm not going to say I would never do it, but it's not something, let me put you this way. If I go to a place and I have a ghost experience, that's fine, but I don't like to kind of go search them out.
Right.
I did do a couple of times where, I did do once where I went specifically on, I don't like calling them a ghost hunt, but, a paranormal investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a bit creepy. I mean, it was fun. It was really a lot of fun, but it was also a bit creepy. And the place that was investigated was really run down, and there was like a lot of water and dust and broken stuff in there. And I said, you know what? I don't think I'll do this. I prefer to just get the stories and not have to go into the field itself per se.
Oh,
so I'm always open to experience a ghost if one ever comes along.
Sounds like my kind of place. So you just want the ghost to come to where it's like nice and warm and, where there's no ceiling tiles falling down on you and where you can't, stab yourself with a splinter while you're walking around. I see how it is.
I love historical houses, like hotels and, houses from the 1800s and things like that.
Oh,
so,
me too.
I guess so.
Me too. Now, in our area, we're fortunate enough we've had the chance to investigate a couple of properties from the 1600s, and just what a difference it is to walk into one of those places and to experience, the energies. Stephanie aside, she can go in there and make direct connections, but even just like the rest of us who are psychic as a brick, to be able to just walk in there and feel just a different change in energy from a place that's so old, it just gives you goosebumps.
Yeah.
What's probably for you, with being able to go out to collect stories and to hear these stories, and I've got to assume that there's probably a good part of you that's also considers yourself somewhat of a counselor for these people that are sharing these stories. And although you want to remain objective as a person that's taking these stories from a journalistic approach, it's got to make you feel like you're doing your part and you're filling the role that you're supposed to be filling when you're just making these people feel better for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, that does come into it. I mean, I'm always very surprised that, I'm always surprised when people thank me so much, honestly. I feel almost a little embarrassed. I'm like, why, Like, I'm just listening to the story, but apparently it does, I guess it does make people feel better. And that's good. That's really a wonderful thing. And I really do enjoy listening to them because it's interesting. It's interesting to me. People want to talk about ghost stories. I've had interviews that last for 15 minutes, and I've had them go for 2 hours. Like the interview really varies. It depends on the person. Average is about 30 minutes to an hour, but there have been times I've been on the phone with them like for 2 or 3 hours. I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm still I may have stopped taking notes already, and it's just we're talking about different things, So,
sure, because they just they open up to you,
there's a human
and
side to it.
Right, they just make a connection with you, and they want to be able to share more with you. Has there ever been a story that somebody shared with you that you've said to them, Listen, I'm happy to take your story and I'm happy to chronicle it for you, but it sounds like you have an issue going on that you might need a research team to come in and check out, or you might need some help that can be more boots on the ground and more involved than you might be able to be.
I think definitely I've had I've asked people if they've done that, but for the most part. This is usually past tense where people have left those places.
Mm-hmm.
So, but definitely when they start talking about red-eyed figures, that's when I get a little creeped out. I have to say,
understandable.
Some of the stories when they're I really enjoy the nice stories about like ancestors coming through or what have you. The ones about red-eyed figures, demonic kind of things, I tend to write those during the day. If I can, I schedule my writing time. I'll say I'm going to write about it during the daytime, because if I don't, I'm going to freak myself out at like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night if I'm doing this after dark.
I mean, there definitely is a different feeling when somebody's sharing with you an experience that's happened to them in the past, and when they're in the midst of having to deal with a haunting, especially something extreme, where you can certainly tell the difference in the way that they are processing what it was, and when they have that distance from the actual experience, they can have a little bit more perspective of it, whereas opposed to when it's active and still happening to them, they might be in such a state of fright or panic or just anxiety over it that they're not able to express it the same way that they would if they were removed from the situation.
I haven't had that experience yet. It'd be interesting if I ever do. Well, actually, no, wait. There is someone that, they told us about there was one woman early on who, she's not always in the house, but she sometimes is, because it's a family-owned house. And when she is, she doesn't sleep well there and what have you, because it's got a lot of activity, a lot of high levels of spirit activity. And so she'll say something like, there's people, you're trying to go to sleep and you hear people walking around upstairs and no one else is up there, or you'll be upstairs and hear fighting, like vocal fighting downstairs. You come downstairs, it disappears. I'm like, oh my goodness, I wouldn't sleep there.
There's plenty of stories that come into me all the time of things that people are going through actively. I can send you some if you want to chronicle some in the moment stories. Some people might even be able to call you as the hauntings are happening.
Well, that would be great. That would be really interesting. I feel bad for them if it's a scary one, if it's something that's disturbing.
Well, the good thing is, we've been able to, over the last 12 years, we've been able to build a pretty good network of people that are able to actually, help with people when they have problems. People will contact us and say, can you come out and investigate my house? I think there's something going on. And we always say the same thing, like, our schedules are so crazy, you don't want to depend on us, but we have built a nice network of people that are able to kind of chronicle things and get back to us and let us know what it is that somebody endured. So, that might be a good thing for you to do, maybe tag along with a group so you don't actually have to be the one to do the investigation, but you could lend your skills as a person who is able to actually take things from an objective approach and help them chronicle what's going on.
Never thought of that. That's an interesting idea. Thank you.
And the best thing about ghost hunting teams? Snacks. They always bring snacks. I feel like
Swedish fish.
Yeah, we can't get through a spooky South Coast episode without mentioning snacks at least once. So it's kind of our thing. But certainly, if you ever wanted to do that, we could help you find somebody in your area, and we will certainly, anybody that we know that wants to share their story and have it chronicled, we'll pass it on to you as well.
Sure, thank you. That would be really great. I really appreciate that.
So let everybody know about your writing, about your work, about where they can find it all, and how they can get in touch with you.
Well, right now the best place is on Facebook, Tara Teresa Hill author. Also Twitter at Tara Teresa Hill. If you want to, you'll find my my email, theghostpostreporter@gmail.com, on either of those sites, and you can just send me an email. A lot of people just message me via Facebook sometimes, and on my author page, and they'll say, you can can I do an interview with you? And then we just set it up. Then I'll ask for an email, and I always do it by email. I'll ask for an email, and I'll set up, a time to interview. I'm pretty flexible.
Excellent. Well, certainly keep us up to date with all of your work, and we'll keep joining. And I really will send a request to join the Paranormal Hotspot. I promise I will not be any more creepy there than I am in other groups.
Oh, I'm sure you're wonderful, and thank you so much. That would be really great.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, everybody, and congratulations on your 12-year anniversary.
Oh, thank you so much. Take care. That is Tara Teresa Hill. And again, you can follow her at the Ghost Post, theghostpost.co. You can follow her on the Paranormal Hotspot group on Facebook. You can follow her on Twitter and on Twitter at Tara Teresa Hill, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Tara Teresa Hill. You'll find her author page. And certainly, when it comes to, you guys know this, is just talking to people about their ghost stories. It's hard to get some people to open up, whereas other people are just dying to share, no pun intended, dying to share this information with somebody else. And it's kind of hard to take that and be able to remain objective as somebody's telling you, because you're dealing with this emotional thing for them, and you can't help but become emotional for them as they're telling the story. I mean, Stephanie, you're open to different, having empathic
Right.
approaches to things, so you're going to open yourself more when you're around somebody anyway. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty easy to get wrapped up in the emotion of somebody when they're sharing one of these stories.
Well, of course, because you can feel their fear, their sadness or their excitement or their happiness or whatever it might be, depending on the type of situation that they're going through, just as a human and relating to somebody else and what they're feeling. Of course you can feel that, and you can experience it yourself just by listening to someone's story.
And Moniz, I know that you've been in situations where you've contacted me and said, we've got these people that are going through something, and, it's just to the point where they're overwhelmed by it. So even though it might not, to you, it might not seem overwhelming, you're consciously aware of when somebody's at something where they might be reaching their breaking point with dealing with it.
Right. For a lot of people, it's just a cathartic release to be able to unburden themselves with the experience. They may not care if you believe them or not. They just want to be able to get it off their chest. Hey, I've had this experience. I need to share it with somebody that's willing to listen. Because let's face it, a lot of times people in families, when you start to try and talk about it, they don't want to talk about it. They want to close it off because that means I got to deal with it. And, I got to sit with this person on Christmas and Thanksgiving and things like that, and they don't want to have that responsibility. So they come to us to be able to unburden themselves.
Or their family's experiencing it, and if it's a family member that they love and trust that's experiencing it, that now makes it real, and therefore they have to face that, and they don't want to, so they ignore it.
And John, I know you've dealt with some cases that were pretty extreme over the years, and had experiences that were pretty extreme. And coming at it from the other perspective, and I know that you've investigated a lot of things that were kind of mundane and weren't as bad, but you've become known for some of your extreme experiences. It must be hard coming from that perspective of sharing it with people and being able to convey to them just what that experience was like, and just how frightening it can be. Obviously, you're not scared because you're used to this and you've done it, but just how intense of a situation they could be entering in if they get into something similar.
It's true. A lot of people, when I would tell the story, they would get almost to the point either they don't believe it, or sometimes they would actually get scared themselves. And I'm not telling them to scare them. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling them because they asked me a simple question. I'm trying to explain to them what it's like to be in that situation. But they end up getting scared themselves, and they get freaked out to the point that, I don't want to be in that situation. I hope I never arise in that. But then there's sometimes that people actually want to know what's going on. So that way, if they ever are in that situation, you've told them how you handled it, and hopefully they could handle it that way.
I do think experience comes into play with it, too. I think if people are telling you one ghost experience that they've had, it's a very frightening ordeal for them to deal with a lot of the times. But if it's something that's been happening, over the course of many years at their home, then it becomes, they're like, oh yeah, that's just the ghost in my house.
Second nature.
Yeah, I'll tell you about the ghost, but it's not really any big deal. And I think that there, with experience and with repeatability, there's a lot of, I don't want to say you ever want to become dull to it, because you want to stay alert and stay in the moment, but there's also kind of some sense of, okay, we're accepting of this now. Let's see if it goes anywhere beyond this. And we've all investigated together, and we've all experienced that before, where we're in a room with some people who are freaking out over the least little thing that's happening, and we're over there saying, like, do something more. What else can you do? Yeah. It's not enough for us to hear a door slam, or it's not enough for us to hear a whisper. We want to have a full out conversation or get knocked to the ground by something.
I did a case up
Is there anybody up there? No.
I just was sharing that story the other day, actually.
I did a case up at Hanscom Air Force Base, and we were called in, and the family, we ended up having 4 locations on the base. We did 2 of the hangars and then 2 residential houses. And one of the houses ended up having a lot going on. So much that the family that was moving around, it was actually the daughter that was causing it. She had what I believe a little bit of...
Poltergeist case?
No, actually telekinesis. And yeah,
what Moni's says, a lot of poltergeist cases they think are caused by a telekinetic adolescent girl.
Okay, yes, and that I didn't know that's what you were getting at. Yeah. Yes, so we're sitting there, and just what you said, we're sitting there going, what can you do? Let us see what can happen. And you can see the family, even though they've been dealing with it for years, because it's followed them from different Air Force bases, because it's her. They literally were terrified while I'm sitting there watching the DVR system, and the investigators are downstairs in the basement with the homeowner and the daughter, and they're saying, do something for us, make a sound, let us know you're here with us. And I'm watching a hand come out of nowhere from behind the father, touch him on the shoulder. Now they're in complete darkness. I can see it on the screen, and you literally see the father turn to his left and look like something was there, brush his arm, but doesn't say nothing to nobody. When I go over and I yell down the stairs, hey, did something just touch you? He goes, yes. And the daughter goes, I told you it was here. I saw it first. And she literally had reacted when she saw that, when I saw the hand, she literally was looking at the father the whole time. Like she saw it with his own eyes. It's just crazy. They were scared, but yet for us, we're just like, come on, more.
and you mentioned something that's very interesting, and it's something we should pursue for an episode, because we've never really talked very much in depth about it. But the idea of poltergeists being something that's actually more man-made, man-created, more than it is something it's paranormal, but more than it is a ghost.
Like?
I mean, to some sense, if you need to have a being, another entity, another intelligence to interact with, but a lot of these cases just straight out happen as, like John was saying, straight telekinesis. And so I think we should probably, we've explored it a little bit here and there, and eventually I gotta get my family to come in. I gotta get my family to come in and share the story of the haunting that I grew up dealing with, where, looking back, it's got so many elements of different types of paranormal phenomena that I'm still to this day, I'm not exactly sure what it was that was causing it, because a lot of it could have been poltergeist activity caused by my, prepubescent cousin. A lot of it could have been the fact that this entire neighborhood is haunted. A lot of it could have been that stuff happened on their very property. It could be the fact that they live next to a cemetery. It could have been that they invented something in their own minds. It could have been that they invited something to come into their, so many different angles to it. And so eventually we got to get them all to come in. But, we might.
Oh, it would be.
Might have to get some of your apple pie to get my uncle to talk.
It would be an awesome subject to talk about, and I mean the stories from just that. We went back there 4 times, but just dealing with that family 2 out of the 4 times that we went, the stuff that went on, and then after getting a couple of psychiatrists involved and getting some doctors involved that we had to. They literally were determined that it was her, and it's because of the meds, so many meds that she was on. And the way the doctors explained it to me, again, I'm simple when it comes to that type of stuff. I don't understand it as well as some others. They're like, when they pumped her so much full of meds, from the average person, the way they explained it was, we can be talking, me and you, Tim, but yeah, I could be listening to Matt talk to Stephanie quietly, like whispering. My side sense is still there, but yeah, I'm still watching the screen in front of me to know when I need to switch something. We can do multiple things. Our brain will allow us. The meds were so much for her, it was shutting it down to one function, and that was her being so upset at her family for moving the location, that she was literally using that from the meds to cause all the stuff to happen and manifest within the house. I watched her break 2 necklaces off of 2 of my investigators that literally just bought them that night. Put them on outside of the gates. They didn't even have them on prior. Put them on outside of the gates. We went in, walked in the house. The girl came around to meet us, and she looked at both the investigators. She started squeezing her hands and squinting her eyes, and literally through sweatshirts, 2 St. Michael crosses dropped, both simultaneously at the same time, dropped out of their shirts.
So how do you explain the hand that you saw? Because that doesn't sound like poltergeist activity. That seems like...
Again, she's saying that she brings her friends into the house. This is what she tells me, that she invites them. So I don't know if she invited something there, because she kept saying the whole time the father was sitting down there talking, oh, I don't believe it, there's nothing here. And she says, Dad, I'll show you, watch. So could she be causing it that way? Possibly.
Definitely
another
sounds
debate for another time.
Yeah.
Definitely sounds like something we need to explore for a full episode. And I'll tell you off there about when I used to wear a cross.
Really?
I'm not religious,
Yeah.
but I wore, because I was like, maybe the ghosts are. So I wore it, and something happened. So I'll tell you that off there.
Nice.
But we're going to have to go for the night because we are up against the end of the show here. We'll be back next Saturday night to celebrate our 12th anniversary. I don't know how we're going to celebrate it. We'll probably have some cake or something.
Well, we have to.
Moniz has a sly look on his face, like he's got something planned. But
Moet?
well, hey, maybe we'll be here next
Little
Saturday
apple pie.
night. Hey, it's all good.
No.
And we're inviting all of
Party
our
pooper.
friends. All of our friends can come next week, next Saturday night to the show. So we'll have more details about that during the week on SpookySouthCoast.com and on our Facebook page and on our Twitter account. So follow us there. Always make sure that you follow everything that we do online. You can reach out to us at any point during the week. Spookycrew at SpookySouthCoast.com. We are always willing to listen and have you share your experiences with us. And if you think you would even make a great guest, even better for us. So we'll be back to celebrate year number 12, the beginning of lucky number 13, next Saturday night. Of course, go Patriots.
Yes.
That
Obviously.
goes without saying. And hopefully we'll be back here next week talking about getting Stephanie's Super Bowl predictions.
We got to vote for Minnesota, though, too.
All right. Stay spooktacular, everybody.
Bedford's News Talk Station. New Bedford's News Talk Station. 1420 WBSM. New Bedford, streaming worldwide on the WBSM app.